Chapter 1. The Body Behind the Bakery. Mike Wright was taking out the trash when a man was killed behind his bakery. It was raining, not hard, just enough to slick the pavement and dampen the cardboard boxes stacked near the alley fence. Mike moved with practiced efficiency, apron tied tight, sleeves rolled, mind already on tomorrow's sourdough schedule. Then the gunshot cracked. One sound. Clean. Final. Mike froze, not because he didn't understand what it was, but because he did. The man fell near the dumpster, face first, blood blooming dark against wet concrete. Another man stood over him for half a second longer, gun still raised, then disappeared into the alley like smoke. Mike didn't scream. He set the trash down carefully. He looked at the body. And then, inevitably, he saw the number. 0. The man was already gone. Sirens followed quickly. Someone must have called, maybe a neighbor, maybe the shooter himself wanted the noise. Police lights washed the alley in red and blue, reflecting off wet brick and metal lids. The body didn't stay anonymous for long. Once the victim's face was recognized, the call went higher than homicide. The dead man wasn't just another casualty, he was a known mafia leader, already under indictment, already central to an organized crime case that had been grinding its way through the courts for over a year. Which was why the prosecutor arrived. Duke Summers stepped into the alley with the police, coat still crisp despite the rain, expression carved from restraint rather than shock. He didn't touch anything. He didn't give orders. He stood just behind the officers, eyes sharp, absorbing the scene like evidence already filing itself into place. When he looked at the body, there was no surprise. Only confirmation. And then he looked at Mike. The air changed. Not in an aggressive way. Just, denser. Earth. Rain-soaked soil. Stone after a storm. Mike inhaled before he could stop himself. The Alpha noticed, not with accusation, but awareness. "You're the one who found him?" Duke asked. "Yes." "You see the shooter?" "No." Duke studied him longer than necessary. Mike knew that look. Most Alphas expected Omegas to shake, cry, fold. Mike didn't. "What's your name?" Duke. Chapter 2. A witness who doesn't shake. The interview room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Mike sat with his hands folded on the table, posture straight, back unsupported by the chair. The apron was gone, replaced by a borrowed jacket that didn't quite fit his shoulders. He hadn't asked for it, someone had pressed it into his hands anyway, as if cold were the worst thing he might be feeling. Across from him, a detective flipped through notes. Duke Summers stood off to the side, arms crossed loosely, presence quiet but unmistakable. Mike could feel him. Not in the overwhelming, instinct-snarling way some Alphas carried themselves, but like gravity, steady, inescapable. Duke hadn't spoken since they entered the room. He'd let the police ask their questions first. "Mr. Wright," the detective said, "can you walk us through what you were doing before the incident?" "I was closing," Mike replied. His voice was even. "Cleaning the kitchen. Taking out trash. No customers. We close at 8. It was 8:30. The detective nodded. "You heard one gunshot?" "Yes." "And then?" "I saw the victim fall. I saw the shooter leave." "Can you describe him?" "No." That earned him a sharper look. "You didn't see his face," the detective pressed. "I saw his outline. His posture. He moved like someone who knew the alley." Mike paused, considering his words. He wasn't panicking. Duke's gaze sharpened slightly at that. The detective sighed. "So no identifying features?" "No." Silence stretched. Mike was used to this part, the subtle shift when people decided he wasn't giving them what they wanted. He could feel it happen, like a door closing. He kept his hands still. Didn't fidget. Didn't rush to fill the quiet. Finally, Duke spoke. "Was the alley door open when you went out?" "Yes." "Always?" Duke asked. "Yes. We prop it open during closing. It sticks otherwise." Duke nodded, filing that away. "And the victim, had you seen him before?" Mike met his eyes. "Yes." The detective stiffened. Where? He's come into the bakery. Not often. Always alone. Never caused trouble. How many times? 3. Maybe 4. Duke pushed off the wall and took the empty chair beside the table, not across from Mike, but at an angle. Less confrontational. Intentional. Did he recognize you? Duke asked. I don't know. But you recognized him, Duke said. Yes. By name. No. By reputation. Mike didn't answer immediately. Duke didn't rush him. Yes, Mike said finally. That changed the air. The detective closed his notebook. Mr. Wright, given the victim's identity and your proximity to the crime, we're concerned about your safety. I figured. You'll need to go into protective custody. Mike turned his head slightly. No. The detective blinked. Excuse me. No, Mike repeated. Come. Certain. I have a business. Staff. Orders. I can't disappear. This isn't optional, the detective said. Duke lifted a hand, not to stop him, but to slow him down. Protective custody doesn't always mean disappearing, Duke said. His voice was level, persuasive without force. It means minimizing exposure. I know what it usually means, Mike replied. I won't be locked in a room and told it's for my own good. Duke studied him. Really studied him now. You don't seem surprised, Duke said. About being in danger? Yes. Mike shrugged lightly. I run a business. I live in a city. People get angry. Sometimes violently. That's not what this is, the detective snapped. This is organized crime. Mike's gaze didn't waver. Then you should know better than to think hiding me will end it. Silence again. This time, Duke broke it with something unexpected, a quiet huff of breath that might have been the ghost of a laugh. You're not wrong, he said. The detective shot him a look. Duke. He's not, Duke repeated. But he's still at risk. Duke turned fully toward Mike. Someone killed him and tied to an active case. They won't leave loose ends. Mike felt it then, not fear, exactly, but confirmation. The faint shimmer of numbers hovered in his peripheral vision, brushing against the detective, the officers outside, the people passing in the hall. Duke still had none. Then what are you proposing? Mike asked. Temporary measures, Duke said. Visibility. Patrols. And, he hesitated just a fraction, direct contact. Mike raised an eyebrow. With you? Yes. The detective stared. You can't be serious. I'm the lead prosecutor, Duke replied. If anything happens to our only civilian witness, the case collapses. I won't let that happen. Fine, Mike said. But I'm not closing my bakery. Duke nodded. Then I'll adapt. For the first time since the gunshot, Mike felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Not because of danger. But because the alpha standing beside him wasn't trying to cage him. He was choosing to stand in front instead. Chapter 3. Protective custody. The threats didn't start loudly. They arrived the way Rot did, quiet, patient, certain. Mike noticed the first sign the next morning when he unlocked the bakery at dawn. The door opened easily. Too easily. He stood there for a moment, hand still on the handle, listening. Nothing was out of place. No broken glass. No overturned chairs. No blood. But the security camera above the register had been turned, just slightly, toward the wall. Mike exhaled through his nose and went inside. He finished his prep before calling it in. There was dough to shape, ovens to preheat. Fear didn't rise to the level of emergency unless it interfered with function, and right now, it didn't. 2 squad cars arrived within 15 minutes. Duke came with them. This time, he wasn't in a suit. Dark jeans, plain coat, no visible badge, only the quiet authority he carried like a second spine. You didn't call immediately, Duke said once they were alone near the back. I finished my starters, Mike replied. Duke looked at him for a long second, then nodded. All right. They reviewed the footage. The blind spot was clean, too clean. Whoever had done it knew exactly how long they had and what angle to use. A warning, one officer said. They know where he works. I already knew that, Mike said. Duke's jaw tightened, not in anger, but calculation. We're increasing patrols, Duke said. And you won't be alone here anymore. Mike folded his arms. Meaning? Meaning, Duke said carefully, someone will be nearby. At all times. Mike tilted his head. A uniformed officer? No. Good, Mike said. That would be bad for business. Duke's mouth twitched. I was thinking more discreet. You, Mike guessed. Yes. That earned a pause. You're not law enforcement, Mike said. No, Duke agreed. But I'm already a target. This doesn't add much to the risk. That's not how math works. Duke met his eyes. It is when the variables are already lethal. Mike considered that. He didn't see a number hovering over Duke, not today, not now, but the edges of the Alpha's life felt dense. Like pressure waiting to happen. Fine, Mike said. But you don't get to hover. I don't hover. You're hovering right now. Duke stepped back half a pace. Noted. The first day passed without incident. Duke took a corner table, laptop open, eyes moving more than his hands. Customers came and went, unaware that the calm Alpha drinking black coffee had put 2 crime families behind bars. By mid-afternoon, word spread. Someone canceled an order. Someone else asked, too casually, if Mike planned to close soon. A man lingered near the pastry case too long, eyes scanning exits. Duke noticed all of it. So did Mike. They worked around each other without speaking, a quiet choreography of awareness. When Mike stepped into the back, Duke followed, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to fail. You're good at this, Mike said eventually. At sitting. Duke replied. At seeing without staring. Duke glanced at him. So are you. Mike smiled faintly. Practice. The second warning came after closing. A brick through the front window. No note. No message. Just shattered glass and a reminder that escalation had begun. Mike stood amid the shards, hands on his hips. That's annoying. Duke swore under his breath. This changes things, Duke said. No, Mike replied. It confirms them. Duke turned to him sharply. You can't stay here tonight. I live upstairs. You can't, Duke repeated. Mike looked at him, really looked, at the tension in his shoulders, the way his pheromones deepened, grounding but edged with iron. Then I'm not going alone, Mike said. Duke hesitated. Just once. Agreed, he said. They locked up together. As they climbed the stairs to Mike's apartment, Mike felt it again, the strange absence where Duke's number should have been. For the first time, he wondered if that absence was protection. Or a promise that hadn't decided how to end yet. Chapter 4. Earth and East. Morning came in shades of gold and flower dust. Mike woke before his alarm, as he always did. The apartment above the bakery was small but efficient, clean lines, warm wood, the faint, ever-present scent of yeast clinging to everything he owned. He lay still for a moment, listening. There was another heartbeat in the space. Steady. Unhurried. Duke was already awake. Mike found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, quietly reading something on his phone while water heated on the stove. He'd taken off his coat, set it neatly over a chair, and somehow managed to exist in the room without making it feel occupied. You didn't have to make coffee, Mike said. I wanted some, Duke replied. I wasn't sure how you take it. Black. Duke nodded, as if that confirmed something he'd already suspected. They moved around each other easily, the silence companionable rather than awkward. Duke didn't ask invasive questions. Mike didn't offer unnecessary explanations. Downstairs, the bakery opened on time. The rhythm of the morning settled them, kneading, shaping, waiting. Duke stayed near the counter, occasionally stepping aside to let customers pass, always aware of exits and reflections. Your place smells like stability, Duke said quietly, watching Mike work. Mike glanced up. That's a strange compliment. I mean it as a good one. I'll take it. By mid-morning, the lull hit. Duke finally closed his laptop. You grew up doing this, he asked. Baking. Mike shrugged. My parents owned a small shop. Not like this. Smaller. They taught you? Yes. Duke nodded. My mother still teaches preschool. Same building for 20 years. Mike smiled faintly. Consistency. My father didn't have much use for it, Duke said. He liked risk. The words sat between them, waited. He died, Duke added. Not dramatic. Just factual. Mike didn't say I'm sorry. He said, that kind of loss leaves marks. Duke met his gaze, something unreadable flickering there. Yes. It does. A customer entered then, breaking the moment. Later, as the day thinned toward afternoon, Duke noticed the photograph on the shelf behind the counter, a younger Mike, arms slung around another man, both smiling in the unguarded way of people who believe distance was temporary. Your brother? Duke asked. Yes. Do you talk? Mike paused. No. By choice. By mutual silence, Mike said. Which is still a choice. Duke accepted that without prying. The quiet returned. For a while, Mike forgot about the shattered window, the blind camera, the looming threat. The bakery was what it always was, a place that made sense. It didn't last. A man stood across the street for too long. Duke noticed first. He shifted subtly, positioning himself closer to the door. Mike followed his gaze. The man met Mike's eyes and smiled. Not friendly. Not threatening. Knowing. Mike's breath slowed. He saw the number before he could stop himself. 312. Not today. Not tomorrow. But inevitable. The man turned and walked away. Do you know him? Duke asked. No, Mike said. But he knows me. Duke exhaled slowly. That's enough. That night, Duke cooked. Badly. This is edible, Mike said diplomatically, poking at the pasta. I warned you, Duke replied. They ate anyway. As dusk settled, the tension crept back in. Duke's phone buzzed twice, updates, warnings, pressure from all sides. You could stay somewhere else, Duke said eventually. Safer. Mike shook his head. This is my ground. Duke studied him. You don't like being moved. I don't like being reduced. Duke nodded once. Then we do this your way. Their pheromones mingled more noticeably as night deepened, earth and yeast, grounding and warm. Not overwhelming. Just present. Mike stood at the window, watching the street below. I don't see your number, he said quietly. Duke turned. What? Nothing, Mike replied. Just thinking. Duke didn't press. Outside, the city breathed, unaware, unconcerned. Inside, two lives had begun to align, not with a promise, but with shared space. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 5. The Omega Who Chooses. The first heat warning came on a Tuesday. Mike noticed it in the way his skin felt too tight, in the faint dizziness that crept in as he bent to lift a tray of rolls from the oven. It wasn't full onset, not yet, but it was close enough to be inconvenient. And dangerous. He adjusted the bakery's schedule without announcing why. Closed an hour early. Sent his assistant home with extra pay and no explanation. Duke noticed anyway. You're off rhythm, Duke said as they locked the door. I'm fine. Duke didn't argue, which somehow made it worse. He simply watched Mike's face, cataloging details Mike usually kept to himself. How long? Duke asked. Day. 2, Mike replied. Duke exhaled slowly. His pheromones shifted, still earthy, but edged now with restraint. We should relocate. No. Duke's jaw tightened. Mike. I said no, Mike repeated, not sharp but unyielding. I'm not spiraling. I'm not incapacitated. I've managed heats alone for 15 years. I'm not worried about you losing control, Duke said. I'm worried about someone else forcing it. That landed. Mike turned away, bracing himself on the counter. I won't be sedated. I won't be locked in a room. And I won't be touched just because instinct says so. Duke stepped closer, but stopped before crossing the line. Then tell me what you want. Mike swallowed. I want autonomy, he said. And I want honesty. Duke nodded. Then here's mine. Your heat makes you a target. I won't leave. I won't cross your boundaries. But I will stay close enough to stop anyone who tries. Mike studied him, searching for the number again out of habit. Still nothing. All right, Mike said. Then we do it consciously. They prepared the apartment together. Scent blockers. Locks checked twice. Curtains drawn. Duke set his phone to silent but kept it within reach. When the heat fully settled in, it wasn't the wild, desperate thing people assumed Omegas became. It was heavy, internal, a pressure that demanded attention, not chaos. Mike breathed through it. Duke stayed present without looming. Sat on the floor with his back to the couch, deliberately giving Mike the higher ground. You can ask me to leave, Duke said quietly. I won't. You can ask me to stay farther away. I won't. Duke nodded. Acceptance, not triumph. The hours passed slowly. At one point, Mike's control wavered, not dramatically, just enough that his pheromones spiked. Duke stiffened, instinct flaring, then reined it in with visible effort. You don't have to, Mike started. I know, Duke interrupted gently. But I want to prove something. What? That I see you as a person first. Mike's throat tightened unexpectedly. By morning, the worst had passed. They sat at the kitchen table, exhausted but intact. Dawn painted the walls pale gold. You could have used suppressants, Duke said. I don't like how they make me feel, Mike replied. Muted. Duke considered that. I've spent most of my life doing the opposite. Amplifying myself until there's nothing left. Mike looked at him. Why? Because if I stop, Duke said quietly, people die. Mike reached across the table, not to touch, but close enough to be intentional. You don't have a number, Mike said. Duke frowned. You've said that before. I see things, Mike admitted. Not everything. Just time. Silence crashed between them. Duke didn't laugh. Didn't dismiss it. And me? Duke asked. I can't see yours, Mike said. That's why you scare me. Duke sat back, absorbing that. And yet you trust me. Yes. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, something had shifted, not bonded, not claimed. Chosen. Chapter 6. Blood on marble floors. The courthouse was louder than the bakery. Footsteps echoed off polished marble, voices overlapped in practiced urgency, and the air carried the faint tang of anxiety layered over expensive cologne. Mike hadn't wanted to come, but Duke had insisted. Visibility cuts both ways, Duke had said. They can't erase you if you're seen. So Mike stood near the back of the courtroom, jacket buttoned, posture calm, eyes alert. Duke was already at the front. In court, he was different. Not louder. Not cruel. Just precise. Every word he spoke landed exactly where he intended it to, carving shape out of chaos. Mike watched the jury lean in, watched defense counsel tighten with each objection overruled. And still. Mike saw the numbers. They hovered over heads like quiet truths, some distant, some terrifyingly close. He forced himself not to catalog them, not to calculate grief. When Duke stood to deliver his closing argument, the room seemed to still. This case is not about power, Duke said. It's about accountability. About what happens when we pretend violence is inevitable instead of chosen. Mike's chest tightened. Then the gunshot rang out. Not inside the courtroom, but close enough. A scream. Shouting. The sharp, unmistakable sound of chaos ripping through order. Down, someone yelled. Duke moved instantly, not toward cover, but toward Mike. The second shot shattered a marble column inches from Duke's shoulder. Mike didn't think. He grabbed Duke's sleeve and pulled, hard, behind the counsel table as deputies swarmed. The shooter was gone by the time they reached the corridor. Another warning. Another line crossed. In the aftermath, Duke sat on the courthouse steps, blood seeping through his sleeve where stone shrapnel had torn skin. It missed, Duke said, as if that was the important part. Mike's hand shook as he wrapped the bandage tighter than necessary. You don't get to decide that. Duke looked at him. Really looked. You pulled me, Duke said. You would have done the same. Yes, Duke agreed. But I wasn't the one in danger. Mike let out a sharp breath. You're always in danger. That night, Duke didn't go home. Neither did Mike. They ended up in Duke's apartment, sterile, minimal, the kind of place meant to be slept in, not lived in. Mike noticed the lack of personal photographs. The careful order. You don't stay here much, Mike said. I don't plan on needing it long-term, Duke replied. Mike frowned. You talk like someone expecting an end. Duke shrugged. I've seen enough of them. Later, as Duke slept on the couch, injured but stubborn, Mike stood at the window, city lights blurring below. He looked back at Duke. And for the first time, the number flickered. Just for a second. Then vanished. Mike's breath hitched. Not yet, he told himself. Not yet. But something had started to count. Chapter 7. The brother who left. The phone rang at 4 in the morning. Mike stared at it for a long moment before answering, already knowing who it would be. Some instincts never dulled, no matter how long they were ignored. Harry, he said. Silence on the other end, broken by a familiar exhale. You still answer that fast. Only for you. That earned a soft, humorless laugh. Figures. Mike stepped quietly into the kitchen, closing the door so he wouldn't wake Duke. The apartment was dark, city hum muted behind thick glass. What do you want? Mike asked, not unkindly, but direct. I saw the news, Harry said. Court shooting. Prosecutor almost hit. That bakery you own, it's yours, right? Yes. You're involved. I witnessed something. Another pause. He could almost see Harry running a hand through his hair, the way he always did when thinking too hard. You should leave, Harry said. Come here. I can help. Mike leaned against the counter. You couldn't help when it mattered. That's not fair. It's accurate, Mike replied calmly. Harry's voice tightened. You don't know what it was like after they died. I do, Mike said. I stayed. The words hung heavy between them. I didn't call to fight, Harry said finally. I called because I'm scared. So am I, Mike admitted. But I'm not running. Is it because of him? Harry asked. The alpha. Mike closed his eyes. Partly. You always did that, Harry said quietly. You commit. Even when you shouldn't. Someone has to, Mike replied. Or nothing ever changes. They talked a little longer, about nothing, about everything. When the call ended, Mike stood alone in the quiet kitchen, phone heavy in his hand. Behind him, Duke's voice broke the silence. That sounded important. Mike turned. Duke stood in the doorway, hair rumpled, injury stiffening his movements. My brother, Mike said. We don't talk. But you did. Yes. Duke watched him carefully. You okay? Yes, Mike said. Then, after a beat, no. Duke nodded, accepting both answers. They sat at the small table, dawn creeping in again like it had a habit of doing so lately. Harry wants me to leave, Mike said. And you won't? No. Why? Mike hesitated. Then, because if I leave now, the numbers win. Duke stilled. The numbers. Mike met his eyes. I see how long people have left. Silence settled, thick, reverent. You weren't joking, Duke said. No. And me. I couldn't see yours, Mike said. Until yesterday. It flickered. Duke absorbed that without flinching. And now? I don't know, Mike admitted. But I know this, if I leave, something ends badly. If I stay, there's a chance. Duke leaned back, exhaling slowly. You're asking me to accept something I can't control. I know, Mike said. I'm not asking you to like it. Just to stand with me anyway. Duke considered him for a long moment. I've built my career on fighting inevitability, Duke said finally. Corruption. Violence. People who think the outcome is fixed. He reached across the table, not touching, just close enough to be deliberate. I don't know what my number means, Duke continued. But I know this, I choose what I do with the time I have. Mike's chest tightened. Outside, the city woke. Inside, two brothers' choices, past and present, settled into their consequences. And somewhere deep in Mike's vision, something waited to appear. Chapter 8. The choice to stay. The city didn't pause just because danger had grown teeth. Morning traffic snarled, vendors opened their stalls, and the bakery doors unlocked at 7 sharp. Mike moved through his routines with practiced calm, but something inside him had shifted, not fear, not hope. Resolution. Duke noticed. You've decided something, Duke said as he followed Mike down the stairs. Yes. That usually means trouble. Only for people who think control is safety. Duke huffed quietly. I feel personally attacked. Mike's mouth twitched. The bakery filled steadily. Regulars came in, exchanging concerned glances at the boarded window now decorated with a temporary mural one of Mike's staff had painted overnight, bright colors, defiant joy. Mike approved of it. Mid-morning, Duke received a call that drained the humor from his face. They're moving faster, Duke said after hanging up. The vacuum left by the leader's death is turning violent. Meaning they want the witness gone before testimony becomes unavoidable. Mike nodded. Then I'll testify sooner. Duke stared at him. Absolutely not. Yes, Mike said evenly. On record. In daylight. With cameras. That's reckless. That's strategy, Mike replied. You said visibility cuts both ways. Duke closed his eyes briefly. I hate that you listen. You taught me. They argued, not loudly, but thoroughly. Every angle dissected. Every risk named. In the end, Duke leaned back, defeated not by logic but by certainty. You don't bluff, Duke said. No. Duke looked at him for a long moment. Then I'll make sure you live through it. The testimony was scheduled. Threats intensified. Notes slipped under the bakery door. A car followed them twice before losing interest. Mike cataloged numbers automatically, some close, some far, but he refused to look at Duke's again. Not yet. That night, they stood on the apartment roof, city lights stretching endlessly below. If this ends badly, Duke said quietly, I need you to know something. Mike turned. That sounds like a preface. It is, Duke admitted. I don't regret this. Regret what? Letting you stay. Letting myself care. Mike stepped closer. Their pheromones tangled, earth and warmth, steady and alive. I'm not fragile, Mike said. I just refuse to disappear. I know, Duke said. That's why I'm here. They didn't kiss. They stood together, shoulders brushing, sharing heat without consuming it. Below them, sirens wailed, distant, constant. Above them, the sky remained indifferent. Mike closed his eyes briefly. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't calculated in days. And chose to stay anyway. Chapter 9. Marked by circumstance. The bond didn't happen the way either of them expected. There was no dramatic confession, no desperate rush born of fear or heat. It happened quietly, in the space left behind after choice had already been made. The night before Mike's scheduled testimony, the city held its breath. They were in Duke's apartment again, not because it felt like home, but because it was harder to predict. Security was tighter. Duke's phone buzzed constantly, updates stacking like dominoes waiting to fall. Mike sat on the edge of the bed, fingers laced together, calm in the way people were calm right before stepping into something irreversible. You don't have to do this, Duke said for the third time. I know, Mike replied. But I want to. Duke stopped pacing. Want what? To be connected, Mike said. Not owned. Not protected as an object. chosen, and choosing. Duke's throat worked. You understand what a bond means? Yes. It complicates everything. Yes. It makes you a bigger target. Mike looked up at him. So do you. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncertain. Duke sat beside him, careful, deliberate. He didn't touch until Mike reached out first, fingers curling into Duke's sleeve. This isn't instinct, Duke said quietly. This is consent. Good, Mike replied. Instinct alone would insult us. The marking was restrained, controlled, intentional. Duke kept his strength leashed, grounding rather than overwhelming. Mike didn't submit, he met him, steady and unafraid. When it was done, there was no haze of possession. Just warmth. Just certainty. Mike rested his forehead against Duke's shoulder, breathing in earth and rain. Duke's hand rested at his back, not claiming, just there. Outside, something exploded 3 blocks away. They both tensed, instincts flaring in unison now. Duke reached for his phone. They know. They already did, Mike said. Later, as exhaustion settled in, Mike finally looked. The number hovered faintly over Duke's sleeping form. 6 days. Mike swallowed hard and turned away before Duke could wake. He would not let those days be ruled by fear. If time was finite, then it would be filled, deliberately. Chosen. Chapter 10, A Future Spoken Softly. The bond had changed the way the world pressed against them, but not in a way either of them had expected. Duke woke early, just as he always did, the pre-dawn light cutting through the blinds and scattering across the hardwood floor of the apartment. Mike was already kneading dough, the flour dusting his hands like tiny clouds that caught the first streaks of sunlight. The bakery smelled warm and alive, yeast rising, a quiet hum beneath the city's pulse. Mike moved with practiced calm, each motion precise and deliberate, but beneath it, every instinct was alert, every sense expanded, as if he could feel the edges of danger brushing against them even now. Duke watched him quietly, standing in the doorway with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to observing before acting. You're quieter than usual, he said, his voice low, calm, steady. There was no accusation there, only the note of concern that seemed to follow Mike like a shadow. Mike shrugged, not breaking his rhythm. Concentration, he said. It was true, in a sense, though not the full truth. His mind was a whirl of calculations, potential threats, exit strategies, contingencies for the bakery, the apartment, the streets beyond. He had no idea how long Duke had left, he didn't see the number yet, but the sense of impending danger was enough to make him meticulous. Concentration about what? Duke asked, stepping closer. His hand brushed against Mike's shoulder lightly, just enough for the contact to be grounding. Mike could feel it through his own tension, steady and warm, a reminder that even in danger, they weren't alone. Mike paused in his kneading and looked up, eyes meeting Duke's. About keeping us alive, he said simply. Not a lie. He was thinking in terms of survival, instinct, timing, and choice. He didn't see the countdown yet, but he could sense how critical each decision had become. Duke didn't comment immediately. He leaned back slightly, watching, his earth-scented pheromones filling the room, a grounding presence against Mike's heightened alertness. Then we face it together, Duke said quietly. Whatever comes tomorrow. Mike nodded. Every second deliberately. There was a subtle weight in his words, awareness of time, even without knowing it in days. He moved deliberately through the morning, checking the locks on the apartment windows, reviewing the bakery security cameras, mentally noting blind spots and escape routes. Duke helped without interfering, suggesting small improvements, a quiet presence, not overbearing, letting Mike take the lead. By late morning, the bakery filled with its usual hum of life. Regular customers came in, unaware of the tension that vibrated just beneath the surface. Mike served bread and pastries with the same calm smile he always wore, each gesture deliberate. He watched Duke at the counter, silent but present, scanning the street outside, aware of every movement without announcing it. Later, when the last customer had left and the bakery was quiet again, they returned to the apartment. Mike leaned against the counter, his hands dusted with flour, and Duke approached him, hand resting lightly on his shoulder. If tomorrow is dangerous, Duke said softly, we face it together. Mike exhaled slowly, leaning into the touch. I know, he said. And that's why I trust you. Not because we have forever, but because we have now. They moved to the roof after dinner, the city stretched out below them, streets dim and wet from the evening mist. Mike watched the way the lights reflected in the puddles on the roof, the hum of distant traffic, the faint glow of neon signs. It was calming and unnerving at the same time, beauty in a dangerous world. Duke stayed close, arms brushing his side, silent but protective. Mike let himself feel it, the presence of someone who would fight beside him, even when the world was uncertain. For the first time in weeks, Mike allowed himself to imagine a future not measured by instinct and danger, but by choice, by moments deliberately lived. He didn't see the number yet. That part of the world remained hidden. But instinctively, Mike knew that time mattered. That every action, every glance, every word with Duke mattered. Tonight, they held each other on the roof, city lights twinkling like distant stars. Breath mingled in the cool night air. No promises were made beyond the next heartbeat, no plans beyond the moment, but that was enough. For now. Because tomorrow, everything would begin to count. Chapter 11, The Number Appears. The morning sunlight spilled across the bakery like it had been carefully measured, catching the dust motes in the air, the warm, yeasty scent of bread fresh from the oven. Mike moved quietly, sweeping flour off the counter and arranging the morning pastries, but there was a weight in his chest that hadn't been there before. He felt it long before he saw it, the faint, almost imperceptible shimmer that hovered in the air whenever he was near Duke. It tugged at him like a thread, delicate but insistent. Then, as he approached Duke, who was drying a single mug in the sink, the world sharpened around him. The number appeared. 4. It hovered faintly above Duke's head, glowing softly only in Mike's perception. 4 days. Mike froze, gripping the edge of the counter so tightly his knuckles turned white. He didn't breathe. Not because he was shocked, not because he didn't understand, he had seen numbers before, had always known the stakes, but because he realized, in a terrifying instant, the weight of inevitability. 4 days. Duke, still unaware of the number, wiped his hands on a towel and turned, the sunlight catching the edges of his hair. "You okay?" he asked, tilting his head, noticing the sudden stillness in Mike. "Yes," Mike said, voice calm, even though the world inside him was spinning. Not a lie. He was functioning, present. But he felt the weight of those 4 days pressing against him, urging him to memorize everything, every habit, every scent, every detail. Duke frowned slightly. "You're distant." Mike swallowed. "Just thinking," he admitted. "About how we live." Carefully. Duke stepped closer, the scent of earth and rain settling over Mike like a grounding force. "We've always been careful," he said softly. "You mean something else?" Mike nodded slightly, his eyes never leaving the faint glow above Duke's head. "Yes. More than careful. Intentional. Every second counts now." Duke's hand hovered near his chest, fingers brushing lightly against the counter. "You sound serious." "I am," Mike said. "And I have to be." He moved through the day with heightened awareness, cataloging threats without making it obvious, observing every shadow beyond the bakery's windows, every figure that lingered too long, every unusual sound. Yet, at the same time, he kept up appearances, serving customers with a calm smile, arranging trays of bread, chatting briefly about cinnamon rolls or the sourdough that had just finished proofing. It was a delicate balance, living fully in the moment while knowing the fragility of what was left. Mike's mind replayed scenarios in endless loops, calculating how many seconds he could steal, how he could protect Duke without revealing the knowledge of the number. 4 days. It wasn't long, but it was enough to do something extraordinary. By afternoon, Duke had taken a few breaks from the counter to sweep the floor and check the ovens. He moved with deliberate care, each motion unhurried, unaware of the invisible countdown ticking above him. Mike watched, memorizing the tilt of Duke's head, the arch of his shoulders, the calm way his muscles shifted as he reached or lifted. These were not just habits, they were the lines of a life Mike could no longer take for granted. Mike's thoughts drifted to the past, the father he had lost, the empty spaces in Duke's life, the shared silences that had become their private language. And now, a number hovered above Duke's head, a reminder of the finite time left to live, to love, to protect. That evening, after the last customer had left, Mike prepared a simple dinner while Duke cleaned up the counters. The city outside glimmered under streetlights, the distant hum of traffic punctuated by occasional sirens. Mike's hand brushed against Duke's as he passed him a plate, and the brief contact sent a shiver through him. Every touch, every glance, now carried weight. Duke caught his eye and smiled faintly. "Something on your mind?" "Yes," Mike admitted quietly, setting down the plate. He hesitated, then added, "I saw it today, something important. Something I need you to know, but not yet." Duke tilted his head, curious but trusting. "You always tell me when it's urgent." Mike nodded, heart heavy. "It is. But urgency isn't the same as timing." They ate in silence, the kind that held understanding without words. Later, Mike lay awake beside Duke, tracing the line of his shoulder with his eyes, memorizing everything, the scent of earth and rain, the quiet rise and fall of his chest, the warmth radiating from his body. 4 days. He would not waste a single one. Chapter 12, The Countdown. The city was quiet in the early morning. Mike opened the bakery before dawn, stepping lightly over the familiar creaks of the floorboards. Today, the countdown had shifted. He could see it clearly now. 3 days hovered faintly above Duke's head, a reminder of how little time they had. He caught Duke moving into the kitchen from the apartment stairs. "Morning," Duke said, voice low, just enough to wake Mike without startling him. "Morning," Mike replied, trying to keep his tone neutral, though his chest felt tight. He forced himself to smile, dusting his hands on the towel. "Coffee." Duke leaned against the counter, watching him. "You're unusually focused." "I have to be," Mike said softly. 3 days isn't a lot. But it's enough to live intentionally. Duke tilted his head, curious, scanning Mike's expression. "Intentional." Mike met his gaze, letting a small smile slip past his seriousness. "Yes. Intentional. Every moment counts. Every glance, every word, every touch, it matters more than you realize." Duke reached out and lightly brushed a stray strand of flour from Mike's hair. "You're terrifying when you talk like that." Mike laughed softly, a short, controlled sound. "I'm serious. You don't understand what it's like to know how little time someone has left." He wanted to tell Duke everything, to reveal the number hovering above his head, but he held back. Not yet. Timing was everything. Duke leaned closer, resting his hands on the counter. "You're keeping secrets from me again, aren't you?" "Not from you," Mike said carefully, "from the world. From circumstances beyond either of us. You'll understand soon." Duke studied him for a long moment. "You've been preparing a lot lately." "Yes," Mike admitted, "because preparation is survival. And survival gives us choices. Choices let us live fully, not just react." Duke's brow furrowed slightly, but he reached for Mike's hand, covering it with warmth. "Then let's make choices together." Mike squeezed his hand, letting a fraction of relief pass through him. Every moment. Deliberately. The morning moved forward with precision. Mike kneaded dough, watched the streets outside the windows, and catalogued every minor detail of the neighborhood. He noted unusual cars, shadowy figures, patterns that could indicate danger. Duke moved alongside him, checking ovens, organizing supplies, unaware of the precise tally hovering over his head. As a delivery arrived, a tall man carrying sacks of flour paused by the counter. Mike greeted him with a warm smile, but internally, he catalogued posture, gait, and reaction time. He noted everything, as if storing each detail for the days that remained. Duke noticed his intense observation. "You're always analyzing everyone," he said quietly. "Even me." "Even you," Mike admitted. "Because you're the most important." Duke's lips curved into a small, amused smile. "Flattery now." Mike shook his head. "Truth. And preparation." They moved through the morning in a rhythm that felt ordinary but was anything but. Each glance between them, each casual brush of a hand, was loaded with awareness. Mike noted the tilt of Duke's head when he smiled, the way his shoulders tensed slightly when an unexpected sound came from the street, the calm yet commanding pheromones that steadied Mike's own nerves. Later, as the sun climbed higher, Duke poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one toward Mike. "You're quieter than usual," he said softly, voice low and intimate. "I can feel the tension in the air." Mike accepted the cup, eyes tracking movement outside. "I can't say exactly why," he said, sipping slowly. "But I can feel it." Danger, it's closer than normal. And we have 3 days to manage it. Duke raised an eyebrow. 3 days. Mike set down the cup, heart tightening. It's a number only I can see. It tells me how much time is left for certain things. For some people, it's just instinct. For others, it's unavoidable. Duke's expression softened, eyes locking on Mike's. And you're telling me now? Not entirely, Mike said. But enough to know that every second today, every choice, is ours. Duke reached across the counter, brushing flour from Mike's hands with his thumb. Then let's spend today deliberately, too. No regrets. Mike allowed himself a smile, the kind that reached his eyes. Agreed. The afternoon passed with preparation and quiet conversation. Mike trained his eyes on the street, while Duke worked alongside him, unaware of the invisible countdown. They discussed the bakery, possible expansions, future breakfasts, even school districts for a hypothetical child. Every word, every glance, carried weight because Mike knew what the countdown demanded: intention. As the sun dipped low, bathing the bakery in gold, Mike finally exhaled. 3 days remained. 3 days to live deliberately, to protect, to love, and to memorize. And he would not waste a single one. Chapter 13, Truth and Time. The morning light fell soft and golden through the bakery windows, dust motes catching in the rays like tiny stars. Mike moved around the kitchen, arranging pastries for display, his hands steady but his mind sharper than ever. Today, the countdown had changed. 2 days. Duke appeared at the doorway, leaning casually against the frame. "You're unusually quiet this morning," he said, crossing his arms. Mike didn't look up immediately. "I'm thinking." "About what?" Duke asked, pushing off the doorframe and walking closer. "If it's about work, I don't care. You don't need to think in silence." Mike finally met his gaze, eyes steady. "It's not work." Duke raised an eyebrow. "It's me then." Mike gave a faint nod. "Yes." Duke leaned on the counter beside him. "You've been distant the last few days. More than usual. I'm assuming it has nothing to do with flour ratios." Mike chuckled softly. "No. It has to do with time." Duke frowned, narrowing his eyes. "Time?" "Yes," Mike said, setting down a tray. "I can see how long some people have left. Their days, their moments, sometimes it's precise. Yours appeared yesterday." Duke blinked. "Appeared yesterday?" "Yes," Mike admitted. 2 days left." Duke's arms crossed over his chest, his jaw tightening slightly. "And you didn't tell me." "I wanted to choose the moment," Mike said, voice firm. "Not the number." Duke sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Of course. You've been preparing letters, baking extra, cataloging, all of that. I thought it was because you were worried about the mafia." "I am," Mike said. "But this is different. It's personal. And we have to make these 2 days count." Duke's expression softened. He reached out and brushed Mike's hand. "Then we'll make them count. Together." Mike felt the tension in his chest ease slightly. "Deliberately," he said. "Deliberately," Duke echoed, a small smile playing at his lips. The morning moved forward in a quiet rhythm. Duke poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Mike. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, setting his cup down. "If you can see how many days someone has, does it change how you see them? How you treat them?" Mike paused, gripping the cup tightly. "Yes. And no. It's not about controlling them. It's about making moments matter. Every glance, every word, every touch. Nothing wasted. Everything intentional." Duke considered that, eyes tracking Mike's hands as they rested on the counter. "So, that's why you've been so meticulous. Every single thing you do." Mike nodded. "Exactly. And I've been waiting to tell you until I felt the moment was right." "You could have just told me any time," Duke said softly, reaching for Mike's hand again. "I trust you, Mike. I always have." Mike's lips curved into a small, honest smile. "I know. And I trust you too. That's why I wanted to tell you today." So we could spend these 2 days deliberately, together. Duke's thumb brushed along the back of Mike's hand. Then let's start immediately. Coffee first, pastries later. And maybe some planning, not work planning, life planning. Mike laughed. Life planning. Yes. Breakfast. School. Bakeries in different cities. Kids, someday. You, me. All the hypothetical things. Mike shook his head, chuckling despite the tension. We have 2 days for all the hypotheticals. Duke smirked. Yes. And you'll survive it. I promise. They moved to the prep table together, cleaning, arranging, and talking. Each word between them carried more weight than it would have before, every glance was deliberate. Do you ever regret it? Duke asked suddenly, breaking the rhythm of cleaning. Knowing what you know. Regret. Mike repeated. No. Not knowing would be worse. I wouldn't be able to protect you, or savor these moments. Duke nodded, then smirked. Savoring moments, you sound like a philosopher or a baker of time, not bread. Mike laughed. Maybe both. Hours passed with deliberate conversation, occasional laughter, quiet touches, and shared smiles. Mike memorized the tilt of Duke's head, the way he squinted slightly in the sunlight, the calm steadiness of his posture. Every small detail mattered. As the sun began to dip, painting the bakery gold, Duke leaned against the counter and whispered, You really do think about everything, don't you? All the time, Mike said. Because I don't want to waste a single second. Duke reached for his hand again, entwining fingers. Then we spend the next 2 days wisely. Together. Every moment. Mike's eyes flicked briefly to the faint number above Duke's head, glowing softly only in his perception, 2. And he knew he would not waste a single one. Chapter 14, The Edge of Tomorrow. The bakery smelled warm and alive, but Mike felt the tension in every corner. He moved quietly, arranging pastries for display while keeping one eye on the street. The number above Duke's head glimmered in his perception, 1, the final day had begun. Duke appeared at the doorway, shoulders relaxed but eyes sharp. He leaned casually against the frame, watching Mike work. One day, he said quietly, as if confirming what he already knew. Mike didn't respond immediately, kneading the dough slowly. Yes, he said finally, voice low. Every second counts. Duke stepped closer, brushing a hand along the counter. Then we make it count, he said firmly, eyes locking on Mike's. There was no surprise in his tone, only resolve. Mike nodded, letting a fraction of relief pass through him. Exactly. Deliberately. They moved through the morning in a careful rhythm, working side by side. Duke checked ovens, wiped counters, and carried trays with calm precision, the subtle scent of earth and rain grounding Mike's heightened senses. Outside, the city hummed with normalcy, but Mike knew better. Shadows lingered longer, figures loitered closer, and the black SUVs had begun to reappear. Duke leaned against the counter, voice low. Do you feel them watching? Mike followed his gaze to a vehicle slowly circling the block. They're close. Too close to be coincidence. Duke's jaw tightened slightly. Then we deal with them. Now or later. Mike glanced at the street, analyzing movements, reading intentions. Later. Timing is everything. Duke smirked faintly. Deliberately, then. By mid-morning, a man emerged from the alley behind the bakery, moving cautiously. Mike caught sight of him and signaled with a subtle gesture, freezing the intruder with calm authority. Duke stepped into position, silent, precise, ready to intercept if necessary. Mike's voice was quiet but firm. You don't want this. Leave. The men hesitated, eyes darting around. Duke's stance was unyielding, grounded. Slowly, the intruder backed away and retreated toward the SUV. Duke watched him go, expression calm but vigilant. Mike exhaled, tension easing slightly. Good. But they won't stop. Duke crossed his arms, leaning against the counter. Then we keep watch. Together. Hours passed with careful preparation and heightened awareness. Each time a vehicle or figure approached, Mike and Duke moved in seamless coordination, gestures, glances, subtle signals that required no words. Every action was deliberate, every movement synchronized. Duke poured 2 cups of coffee, handing one to Mike. "Do you ever get used to knowing this?" he asked, nodding toward Mike's subtle observation of the streets. Mike took the cup, eyes scanning the corner. "Used to it? No. But I've learned to use it. To live intentionally. Every second, every word, every touch matters more now." Duke smirked. "You really do sound like a philosopher and a baker of time all in one." Mike allowed himself a small smile. "Maybe I am. And today, we make it matter." By late afternoon, the attackers became more aggressive. Another SUV pulled up closer than before, black windows reflecting the bakery's golden light. Duke's hand hovered near his concealed weapon. Mike placed a light hand over it, shaking his head. "Not yet," he said. "Wait for the right moment." Duke exhaled slowly. Deliberately, he murmured. They moved together through the bakery, cleaning, arranging ingredients, and checking security cameras, while their senses remained trained on every sound outside. Every casual movement had weight, every word between them deliberate and full of meaning. "Do you think we could ever get used to this?" Duke asked quietly, glancing toward the window. "To knowing it's all numbered?" Mike shook his head, voice steady. "No. But I do know one thing." He reached for Duke's hand, holding it firmly across the counter. "We face it together. Every second, deliberately." Duke's thumb brushed the back of Mike's hand. "Then we fight through it. One day, all the way." The faint glow above Duke's head shimmered in Mike's perception. The final day had begun. Every glance, every motion, every whispered word mattered. The world outside threatened chaos, but inside the bakery, they had created a bubble of intention, connection, and love. Mike leaned close, inhaling the earthy scent of Duke's pheromones, steadying himself. "No mistakes," he said quietly. Duke nodded, voice low and certain. "No mistakes. Every second counts." The day stretched before them, full of danger, possibility, and deliberate choices. Mike knew that every heartbeat mattered. And he would not waste a single one. Chapter 15, The Final Stand. The morning sunlight cut across the bakery's counters in sharp lines. Mike's hands moved steadily, arranging pastries and wiping surfaces, but his senses were taut, alert to every shadow. The number above Duke's head had vanished, 0 days remaining. Duke moved behind him, eyes scanning the front and back entrances. His hand rested near the grip of his firearm. "2 officers are already stationed outside, plainclothes," he said quietly. "They cover the exits. Nothing gets past unnoticed." Mike nodded, muscles coiled. "4 attackers." "4, Duke confirmed, his voice calm but tense. "We'll be ready. Stay close and watch the doors. Observe their approach." The black SUV rolled down the street. 4 armed men stepped out, scanning the bakery and the surrounding streets. 2 entered the front, 1 approached from the back alley, and 1 lingered by a window, covering their team. Mike stayed behind the counter, alert, feeling Duke's pheromones, steady, earthy, grounding, radiating calm despite the tension. The first attacker stepped inside. Duke fired immediately, the shot precise, hitting the man's leg. He crumpled to the floor, incapacitated. The second attacker fired in response. A bullet struck Duke in the upper chest near the shoulder, puncturing his lung. Pain flared sharply, but he staggered only slightly. He returned fire with deliberate precision, hitting the man in the leg and forcing him to drop his weapon. The 2 backup officers moved simultaneously. 1 intercepted the man entering from the alley, restraining him effectively, while the other blocked the 4th attacker near the window. Within moments, all 4 attackers were neutralized, 2 incapacitated, 2 restrained. The immediate threat had been eliminated. Duke pressed a hand to the wound, blood soaking through his shirt. He remained upright, shielding Mike with his presence, breathing heavy but measured. Mike knelt beside him, hands trembling as he traced the familiar line of Duke's shoulders and chest, memorizing every detail as he felt the warmth fading. "Deliberate," Duke whispered, voice faint but steady. "Every moment." Mike pressed his forehead to his, inhaling Duke's pheromones one last time. The grounding scent was fading. His chest ached as the reality settled over him. This was the final moment. He remained quiet, holding him, allowing the calm, deliberate strength that had always steadied him to linger even as Duke's life slipped away. Duke's eyes fluttered once, locking on Mike with the same calm intensity he had carried throughout their bond. Then his chest stilled, the warmth leaving, the presence fading. Mike stayed beside him, breathing alongside a body that would never move again, letting grief settle like a weight on his chest. The backup officers secured the bakery, checking the exits and collecting weapons. The attackers were taken into custody. Evidence was logged, and all details recorded for the investigation. Weeks later, Mike attended the courthouse. Each of the 4 perpetrators was convicted on multiple counts: conspiracy, attempted murder, and assault. Security footage, officer testimony, and Duke's careful planning had ensured the case was airtight. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, Mike drew in a long, steadying breath. The bakery awaited him in the distance, flour dust and the faint smell of bread grounding him. In his bag, a small medical report offered subtle confirmation of new life, the pregnancy that marked the future Duke would never see. Mike's gaze shifted to the streets, where life went on, indifferent. Every decision, every action, every second of that day had been deliberate. Duke's sacrifice had preserved him, and now Mike would honor that by living deliberately, fully, and courageously. He would carry forward both Duke's memory and the life they had begun to build together. The countdown had ended. The attackers were neutralized. Duke had given everything, and life would continue, fragile, precious, and deliberate.